reminder.
Because I actually, I watched one of your YouTube videos. I was doing, when I was doing my piece yesterday, I was listening to your YouTube collage class, and it was really useful, I gotta say. It just made me think about things. So
Good.
yeah, and it's funny, I kind of felt I was in the Zoom meeting but it was recorded, but it was kind of in the background, and I just, people's questions were good too, like things I was thinking about, about
Yes.
the art supplies and stuff. So it's really useful to sort of go over again as well,
Yeah, I'm glad that was helpful. And this is the advantage of the Zoom classes, is since we're not really spending the time in our own little private zone with the music on, doing our work, but it's more of a group participatory thing. There's a lot of value in learning from each other and looking at each other's work and hearing each other's questions. So there's actually some really strong benefits from the Zoom format. So I'm really glad that was helpful. And thank you for reminding me to record. I have to admit that's a weakness of mine, is I don't always remember to do that. So thank you. Okay. And FYI, I will only be recording the demo presentation. I won't be recording the group critique and share. So
I kind of like that though too. I've got to say, you had that on your other, I don't know how other people feel about it, but it was actually, you gave a lot of information as well. And
well, there is a lot of info, so this is my dilemma. And if you all agree to have them public, then we can do that. If I show the whole group and display everybody, then I have to make it a private link. And it's just a little more work for me to do that because, and it's not required for us to do the critique, but if I do the critique and there's anybody who doesn't want their work or their self to be shown on public YouTube, then I have to make it a private link. And it's just more work for me because the emailing process is not simple for me. I have to go to my rosters, I have to download it in Excel, I have to copy and paste the 2 columns of emails, your pipeline and your personal. Then I have to go to YouTube and get the link and then put it in and then send you an email that way. And with 5 classes and with all the emails I get, I'm trying to really pare down my administrative emailing work. So these are the options, you guys. I can either do the demo only and have it be public. If you all agree and are fine with having you and your work publicly displayed, I can record the whole meeting and put it on public. But if there's anyone who doesn't want that, then I'd like to bypass having to do the private link and sending that. I'm doing that in my art journaling class because it's really personal content, but
Krista, I was just going to add that I appreciate all the learning that we get from the critiques, but I think, if we take enough classes with you, a lot of these things come around again, and you can kind of pick up some of that information in other classes, and I would vote to not making it harder for you.
Yeah, I would too, Carissa. And one of the things we did in the spring semester was take screenshots, camera shots of each other's work. And, we can take notes down. We don't want to give you the work.
Yeah, I think that's mainly for people who don't come. And the thing is, I feel if someone can't make it to class, I don't think we all should be compromising to accommodate them. Yeah. That's kind of how I feel about it. So if you are here and you're catching it, you can take screenshots or take pictures with your phone and take notes. So why don't we leave it the way it is? Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me. Being new, I'm very self-conscious of what
I know. I know,
It
I
is-
totally understand. It's kind of vulnerable anyway when you're putting yourself out there and sharing your work. So let's just keep it to the lesson.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Carissa, I have a question. So if you wanted to see the demos on YouTube, what do you have to do? You have to put
So
in
you
your
go
name?
So go to youtube.com and then in the search, type my name, Carissa Luminous,
God.
and my channel will come up. And then
Mhm.
each class is listed by the name of the class and the date. So today we'll
Okay.
say Collage and Mixed Media, September 2nd.
Okay.
And you know, you can catch other you can catch watercolor
Mhm.
demos there and abstract painting. You can catch other demos there too, so it's kind of cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. And if you have any questions or comments during this presentation, just unmute yourself and pop in, okay? So this is a abstract watercolor that I had done. So today's topic is, let's see, I need to find it. Your intention for a new world. So last week we did our quarantine experience, and now as we emerge into the changed world, you know, what is our intention for us in the world? And so I'm working with this very feminine woman holding the flowers. And I felt that this painting, this abstract painting alone wasn't enough. And so I cut her out of a magazine. And this is, last week I worked on canvas. This one is on paper, but I'm still going to use my gel medium to adhere her because as you'll see, I'm going to be adding a lot of other media on top of it, including some wet stuff. And if I just use paste, the magazine paper won't hold up. So this is pretty thin paper. Oh, and that one flower, this one I cut out from one of my watercolors. I'm just going to apply the gel medium with my fingers. And I know I showed you this last week, but I think it is really worthwhile to see it again to really drive home the point of using plenty of gel medium and really getting it all the way to the edges. Now you'll see this thin magazine paper is going to curl super easily and it's very fragile. So you have to be a little delicate, but it's important that you get that little flower stem because you're not going to want any of the paper to be lifting up. Notice how I've got it face down right on the work. You can do this because you're going to be putting the gel medium on top of this. So you don't want to waste your gel medium. You want it to go onto your painted surface. So I'll flip her over and find just the right spot where I want her to go. Now, in order to avoid getting air bubbles, especially in this thinner paper, it is a good idea to use your finger, and you can kind of start in the center of your image and just work your way out, and really you can smooth and push out all the air bubbles. I'm having to kind of get her arm unkinked and kind of brought out into the right place. And you know, when you're using this thinner magazine paper, you will get a little bit of wrinkling, but it just becomes part of the texture of the piece. Like I wouldn't worry about it too much. You know, just you have to kind of allow the medium to have its own way in the piece. So I'm getting everything in place. And now I'm going to start pressing it down. So I'm going to put some more gel medium on top and smear it around with my fingers and get a nice, smooth, firm adhesion here. Yeah, it's fun to get your, I like to use my fingers a lot. I use it for the painting as well. You can see I do have a little bit of wrinkling in her, but it's all going to work out. Now I'm doing my flower. You have to use a little more. With a thinner paper, you'll notice you don't need to use as much. With the heavier, you know, the watercolor paper, it's pretty, I think this is even 300-pound paper. You've really got to use kind of a lot to get it down there. So I'm putting that down. Her hand was cut off in the photo and I didn't want that. So I just decided to put a flower on the end. And that's kind of nice. Like sometimes the image itself, because of its faults, will lead you into a solution that you wouldn't have included otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and just lightly smear some of the gel medium across the whole paper because I actually want to have the same type of sheen surface on the whole thing. So I'm just going to kind of smear this around the whole thing. And you don't need to see all that. So that was the first layer, was gluing her and the flower on. Now she's all dry. I let her dry. I'm going to do some embellishment. These are my water-soluble wax crayons. They're made by Caran d'Ache and they're on your materials list. What I want to do, I don't want, so last week's collage I had a crisp edge pretty much. So it was really clearly collaged on. I don't want that in this instance. There's too much of a discrepancy. You know, my last weeks both were painted. My image was painted by me and the background was painted by me. So right off the bat, there was some cohesion. These two images are so disparate that they don't really blend. So what I need to do is I need to integrate her into this color field. And I need to soften this hard edge at the bottom so that she's emerging out of this background and integrate her so she's really more part of the piece. So I'm taking my Caran d'Ache wax crayons and I'm putting some also into the interior of her body and around the edge. And I'm using, you know, I don't really have that many colors, but using my similar colors that are coming off the edges and bringing them out into the field and also onto her a little bit. So it's like this bridge. And I want this photographic look to get a little more painterly. So I'm also putting some orange on her top. And that will also kind of help with the wrinkles a little bit. It will kind of help blend some of the wrinkling in there. So I'm going to work this for a while. I'm also going to put some into my flower. So, you know, you're getting some kind of painterly mark making on here. So I'm going to do that for a while. Then what I do is I get a little watercolor brush. It's water soluble. And you can either leave the crayon marks on, or if you want to soften it a little bit and make it a little more watercolory, you can just simply dip your brush into the water.
Excuse me, Carissa.
Uh-huh.
How would this technique, I understand about the crayon, for the acrylic, how else do you blend with acrylic?
You'll see,
Okay.
because I'm going to do more mediums. I'm just starting out with this, but I'm going to be showing you more. Okay, so yeah, so you can see how it helps kind of merge the image together. It's going to take a lot of layers for me to really get this. But so this is one medium and one technique when you're working with paper, okay, or watercolor. Trying to think. Yeah, like if you have a paper on top of acrylic, you can also do this. It will go over, because I've done that. You can go over the paper and the acrylic with the wax water soluble crayons. Okay, so I'm going to be doing this for a while. I'm doing more. And then what am I going to do now? Oh, I wanted to show you how to make your own stencils, because I'm going to be doing some stenciling. I have a few of my own stencils, but you can also make your own. So you want this type of weight of paper. It's the cover of just a spiral notebook. And I'm carving out these shapes with my utility knife. What I'm doing is I'm recreating, see these shapes in her dress? I'm recreating these shapes in her dress because I'm going to stencil that and extend her dress down here. So I'm just going to cut out these kind of like ovally diamond type shapes. And notice how I'm doing it on top of a piece of foam core. You can use cardboard, but you don't want to cut right into your table. Even though you can see my working table is pretty trashed. But use some soft cardboard or scrap foam board or mat board to cut. So I'm just going to repeat, and you can do any kind of shapes. It's a really great way. And I think that making your own stencils just gives the work all the more authenticity. Like, as much as possible, I like to include my own art in my work. Today, I do have a magazine image, and I often do use images from magazines, but ideally, you know, the more you can contribute your own work, like you've seen some of those mixed media pieces where people just buy everything at Michael's and then put it together. That's more like craft, you know? The more you can make it your own, the more artistic it's going to be. So I'm doing this kind of random pattern for like her dress. Okay, and now I'm going to stencil it on. And I'm going to show you a couple of different stencil techniques. This is a scrap piece of masonite panel. Did I talk last week about using a scrap board for your palette? And then you can use it for another piece. So this one, it's got a little bit of paint, and I had been playing around with this music paper for another piece, which I didn't end up using, but it was sitting here. And you can actually glue that down with the acrylic paint. So I'm going to integrate. So as I'm working on this piece, I'm actually kind of starting a second piece over here just by adding the random random things that I have lying around. I am mixing up the color in her dress, and so she's got this kind of warm yellow, buttery yellow color, and then she's got this kind of aqua turquoise. So I'm finding my acrylics to mix up my colors and squeezing it onto my palette. And I'm going to mix my colors And this is a stencil brush. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to apply your stencils. This way makes them very precise edges and really crisp. And if you don't have a stencil brush, you can just use a really stiff acrylic brush, and you don't add any water to your paint. You want to keep it on the dry side. So I'm going to start by mixing up that turquoisey aqua. I'm starting with my yellow and adding, is that what color I'm mixing up? I don't know. I'm not sure what color I'm mixing up. Let's see what I do. Actually, I'm doing the yellow. So I did put a little bit of the turquoise in, but it's lemon yellow and that goldeny orange and some white. And I'm mixing my colors up with the brush. They have these stencil brushes at Michael's. I don't think they're very much money. And I'm going to place my stencil where I want it. It's going to overlap her dress a little bit because it's coming off of her dress but going down into the background. And I'm just lightly dipping my brush in the paint. You don't want it super loaded. And then you have to kind of firmly press the stencil down so it stays close to the paper, and just, you know, kind of stipple the paint into the shapes. Okay, so Denny, this is as large as my video goes, but what you can do, I don't know if you're on full screen, but if you go up to the top of your bar on Zoom, well, let me just say one thing here. You have to lift this up very carefully, and then I'm going to repeat it. See, this is the nice thing about stencils, you can repeat it, but you have to be careful. Notice how I have the edge of this not on top of the wet paint because it would smear, right? So I have to move it over to an area where it's not overlapping what I've just painted because this needs to dry. So if you want this to get as big as possible on the screen, like this is as big as it goes because right now it's filling the full height of my screen. But at the top bar of your Zoom, on the far right, there's 3 buttons that says more. And if you click on that, there's an option for your size. You want to maximize size to 100% or whatever. So I can't control how large this is on your screen. You have to do that on your end. Okay, so I did a second. Now I'm doing a third round of this down below.
Chris, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you can even answer this because I'm sure it's just your own artistic talent, but you know, I often wonder what colors to accentuate. Like you chose the yellow to carry that through. Can you say anything about your choice, or is it just something you just know because you know the way colors work together?
Well, you mean why did I choose the yellow in
Yeah.
the magazine or for the paint right now?
No, for the paint. You know, you wanted to accentuate that.
Because there's a lot of yellow in her skirt, and I'm wanting to make her skirt looks like it's coming out of the purple background, so I need a lot of yellow. I'm also going to be doing some turquoise, but there's less turquoise in the skirt. It's mostly the yellow, so I'm doing a lot of the yellow. But you'll see I'm also going to do some of the turquoise. The yellow is the one color, well, there's also some black, but the yellow is the one color in her that's also in the painting. So it's going to be, shoot. Can you guys, I've been having issues with my internet, and I don't think it's my personal internet. I think it's Cox, but if I freeze for a long time, it means my call got dropped. Don't go anywhere, just hang tight, and I'll come back in a few minutes if that happens, okay? I just got my new laptop, and I got the Zoom loaded during my lunch break, but I couldn't do the class there today because I have all the critique images on this desktop. But I'm going to try, next week, I'm going to try my laptop and see if I have better luck with that. Okay, so now I have to let this dry before I do any more layering on this because I want to keep these really crisp edges. So now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to integrate this peachy color. Needs to be brought into the painting a little bit, you know, because it's the only peach here, and it's popping out a little too much. I'm wanting to weave some of this in, and I've got this flower here that's peach. I have these really cheap sponge shapes that I got from Michael's. I got like a whole container of them for $5, and they have these little flower shapes, so I'm going to stamp some of those on. But first, see how I'm mixing up the peach to match this flower? I did a couple of different oranges and I added some white to it, and it's a pretty good match. And I've got 3 different flowers, and they're different sizes. And I'm going to play around with making a little pattern of flowers into the background here to kind of help integrate that in. So you just take the sponge again. Actually, I think I needed to, I'm testing it out on some paper to see how it stamps. I needed to add a little bit of water to it because it was a bit too dry. So I'm just dipping it in my water container. And it is a good idea, you know, to test things out on some scrap paper. That was a little too wet, but then once I stamped some of it off, it was pretty good. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp some of these flower shapes into this yellow beam of light that's kind of coming down to the flower. But notice how I'm actually overlapping into some of the purple too. I'm just going to repeat these. So the fun thing about stamps and stencils is that you can repeat them, you know, and it's a pretty quick, easy way to get patterns and shapes down onto your work. And then I'm just going to do some different sizes. I'm going to repeat that along here. So I'm putting some of those in. Okay, so I guess I decided to leave this ray of light, and I just have the flowers kind of going off into this area. So I've done the wax crayons, some stenciling, and some stamping, and I still need to do more. So, and each time, you know, I'm letting it dry in between, so now it's all dry. Whoops. Let's see what I'm going to do next. Getting my music on. Okay, this is some glitter glue, which is really fun and it's cheap. And I'm going to just dip my finger in the glitter glue, and I'm smearing it into her hair. I guess I'm giving her kind of a halo of sparkle. There's some iridescent gold paint in this painting. So this is kind of, you know, going with that iridescent gold with the glitter glue. And I have a few different colors of the glitter glue, and I'm going with the gold. And I'm just kind of smearing it around to soften the edge of her head and give, oh, I'm gonna pour it right on. I'm wanting a lot. So I'm gonna squeeze a good amount on there. Yeah, it's only like $1.49 at the dollar store. And I'm gonna smear some glitter glue around her head. By the way, you know, this is a watercolor on, actually it's got some acrylic inks in it, but as I mentioned last week, you can also paint on paper, on watercolor paper with acrylics. Okay, and then so I did that, and then, okay, I'm gonna do some more stenciling. So I realize these butterfly patterns have kind of, it's kind of a similar pattern as this turquoise. So I'm just going to use part of the butterfly stencil, and I'm going to use my brush and just stencil part of the butterfly. And I'm using the turquoise now. But I won't do as much turquoise because there's less of it in her skirt. But just like with the yellow, I'm going to repeat it in a few places, and you can see I'm changing up the angle of it. You know, play around with it. I'm gonna maybe catch another wing. I made it a little more green. I changed the color a little bit for over here. I think I decided this was a bit too bright, and I needed to soften the color a little bit. So I'm going to repeat that a few times again, being careful not to. And then I got darker down here. What am I doing now? Okay, I think. All right, that's the end of that layer. And then just have a couple more, you guys. I know this is kind of lengthy, but I just want to really get into it to show you how you can really, you know, integrate the piece, especially by just adding a lot of different media on top. Okay, so now, let's see, what am I gonna, so these are acrylic paint pens, and it's basically just like it says, acrylic paint in a pen form. And I'm gonna use it to go and just do a little bit of embellishing and drawing. I'm gonna accentuate the stem on her rose up there. And I'm using the same color that's in her skirt to kind of weave them together. Here's a yellow. Yeah, these are the One for All acrylic paint pens. And I buy these individually at Art Essentials. You have to kind of, what I'm doing right now, you have to kind of poke it on a hard surface to get the flow going sometimes. But I'm wanting to bring out the rose, so I'm adding some paint. And that way too, when you add paint to the magazine, it gives it more of a painterly quality. You can smear it around while it's still wet. Okay. And I'm going to add more stencils at the bottom, but you don't need to see that again. I'm doing some dark. I wanted to get some real darks where the magazine cutoff is to disguise that hard edge. I don't want that hard edge of the magazine cutout. So you can see how that makes it blend and merge into the background. So I did lots of stenciling down below. And then I came back with the yellow. I added more yellow. Oh, I'm doing green on my handmade stencil. So that's the end of that one. And then here's the last one.
Stenciling creates so much movement. The pattern just makes it look
Yeah,
like moving.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I think I'm going to do another stencil, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm doing more with the, I'm coming back in with the wax crayons. I'm doing some more of that. You know, you can come back in and layer. Just because you've done a medium once, it doesn't mean you're done with it. You might need to come back in and build it up some more. And I'm wetting it down now. And I'm going to do more stencils. I think this, okay, I'm doing more stencils with the light green, more with that shape. So I did a lot of stenciling. The green, all different shades. Because what I want to do, I want this skirt to take up more of the purple background. So I really had to do a lot of stenciling. Okay, and that's it. So that's the finished piece. There's another way of stenciling that builds up more texture, and that's using a putty knife and adding gesso to it to make it really thick, and you really glob it on. And I'll show that in another class sometime. So does anybody have any questions about this?
Yeah,
So-
did you, the butterfly stencil, did you make that, or is that something you bought?
No, I bought that. Yeah, I have like 4 stencils that I bought at the art supply store, and that was one of them.
And do you wash your stencils off after you use them?
I do if I get to it. Some of them have paint on them, but if I can get to it, I'll wash them. Okay, does anybody have any questions? So we did, in this piece, I did the water-soluble wax crayons, the stencils with acrylic paint, the stamping with the sponges, and the acrylic paint pens. So I added 4 medium, but you can see how now you can't really see the magazine cutout, right? How that really helped her. Now she looks like she's emerging from the field, which is what I wanted. And there's this diagonal, you know, adding these sponges of the peach kind of like emphasizes this diagonal flow down here, this like shaft of light. And the title of this piece is Inner Light. And that's my intention for a new world is radiance. I don't know if you guys remember when we started at the beginning of the year in January before our quarantine. In this class, we did a piece where we chose a word as our intention for the year, and mine was radiance. And I'm still working with that. And what I have found myself going through during this quarantine process is really purging a lot of darkness and old trauma and stuff so that my inner radiance and light can shine forth. So this piece is really appropriate for that.
What sort of background what substrate is it? Is it watercolor paper or masonite?
It's watercolor paper.
Okay.
So my
Okay.
question is, do you do your background and then find your collage piece, or do you start with your collage piece and then put your colors and your background together?
I usually start with my background first, and then I start with more general and get more specific. So, since this piece is on paper, it's going to be framed under glass or plexiglass, and so it doesn't need any kind of protective finish. If it were on acrylic, you know, you'd want to put the Minwax coating on top.
Have you shown the pictures from last week?
No, we're going to do that next. Yeah, so how the structure of the class works is I'll do the demo portion first, and then when we're done with that, we'll move into critique, which we're about to do now. So does anybody have any other questions about any of this before we move on?
Yeah, can we use photographs instead of a magazine article?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to stop the recording.